The Elysian archaeologists hacked at the icy ruins with plasma axes, stunned to unearth a secret human cryopod, whose technology far surpassed their own crude mimicry. "This changes everything," one gasped, eyes wide as he beheld the genius of mankind, now the galaxy's boogeyman. The decayed colony site had seemed unremarkable until now. An emergency session of the Galactic Council was hastily convened, as a shaken Elysian representative named Deneb delivered the news that threatened to upend 1,000 years of uneasy détente. Initial scans revealed a living human inside the cryo chamber, which predated humanity's withdrawal from galactic affairs over a millennium ago. The council chamber erupted into panicked shouts. "This cannot stand," the insectoid Xerx ambassador chittered. "If the humans learn we have violated the isolation accords, they will reduce our homeworlds to cinders." "We must destroy the chamber immediately, and never speak of this again," urged the gelatinous Uzagrub. But Deneb slammed his fist on the podium. "No, this derelict predates the accords. Legally we are in the clear, don't you see? This is our one chance to learn their secrets through this human out of time, to gain an edge should the flames of war reignite." Murmurs of assent spread through the chamber. A consensus emerged. The cryo chamber must be recovered discreetly and the human inside revived for interrogation. But none could risk direct council involvement. Thus it fell to Joseph Holmes, a roguish human mercenary and smuggler, to lead the mission. Only his human biology and galactic criminal ties made the job feasible, but even he balked at the danger. "You're asking me to betray my own kind," Holmes said, jabbing a finger at Deneb. "Give me one good reason why I should." "Because if this human reveals how your species clawed its way to the stars, how you unlocked technologies we can scarcely comprehend to establish unrivaled dominion, that information in the wrong hands could shatter our fragile peace and reignite a war that consumed a galaxy. We all have a stake in this, Mr. Holmes." The human frowned. The credits were tempting and the chance to put the smug council races in his debt even more so. But failure risked bringing ruinous conflict to the human worlds he called home. With a heavy heart, Holmes nodded. "I'll do it. Just remember, if I end up unleashing doomsday, it's on your heads, not mine." The team raced through space, the ship's engines humming as Deneb hunched over a console, his brow furrowed as he pored over records and data files. His eyes widened as a name and face filled the screen. Dr. Elias Novak, a brilliant human engineer who had been at the forefront of cryogenic technology research centuries ago. But then, under shadowy circumstances, Novak and all his groundbreaking work had vanished without a trace. "Holmes, listen to this," Deneb said excitedly. Novak was working on next-generation cryo chambers, ones that could theoretically sustain a human indefinitely, but his research was considered a threat by human authorities. Holmes raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess, they were afraid of humans becoming immortal." Deneb nodded. "Exactly, and then he disappeared. But what if—" His eyes gleamed with a thrill of discovery. What if Novak used his own tech to fake his death and escape? But something went wrong, leaving him trapped in cryo-sleep all this time. "Hold on," Holmes said. "How could a pod possibly stay powered for hundreds of years?" "That's the thing," Deneb said. "Scans show the chamber is running on some kind of compact fusion reactor. Tech way beyond anything even the most advanced races have. It's—" Holmes let out a low whistle. Leave it to a human to build a battery that outlasts civilizations. As the ship descended towards the planet, the ruins housing the cryo chamber growing larger on the view screen, Deneb's console started beeping urgently. "I'm picking up anomalous energy readings from the site. Something's—" The ship lurched violently as the ground below them quaked. Before anyone could react, a concealed plasma cannon turret rose from the ruins like an ancient sentinel, its barrel glowing ominously as it locked onto the ship. "Shit!" Holmes yelled, yanking the controls hard to the side just as a searing plasma blast shot past them, the heat of it washing over the hull. The ship groaned in protest as Holmes sent it corkscrewing through increasingly desperate evasive maneuvers. Deneb, jam that thing's targeting, he barked, sweat coating his forehead as he narrowly avoided another blinding plasma lance. Deneb's fingers flew over the controls, the whole ship shuddering around them as a blast clipped the rear shields. Warning lights flashed and klaxons blared. Finally, the turret fell silent, leaving a smoke trail as the badly damaged ship limped down to the surface, setting down heavily a short distance from the ruins. The team sat in shocked silence for a moment. Must be some kind of automated defense system, Deneb said shakily. Probably programmed to target non-human ships. Holmes ran a hand through his hair. Great. Let's hope that's the worst this place has in store. They proceeded on foot, each step cautious, eyes scanning for any more unpleasant surprises as they picked their way through the ancient stones. But nothing stirred, the only sound the howling of the wind over desolate ruins. At last, they reached their prize, the entrance to the cryo chamber itself. But their relief was short-lived as they found themselves faced with a massive, unyielding blast door. They tried everything, cutting torches, hacking tools, even brute force. But the door remained steadfastly shut, mocking their efforts. Frustration mounting, they were on the verge of giving up when Holmes spotted it. A small, unassuming fingerprint scanner, nearly buried under centuries of grime on the side of the doorframe. He strode over to it, shrugged, and pressed his palm to the interface. To everyone's slack-jawed amazement, the scanner pinged an affirmative, and with a great grinding of long unused machinery, the blast door shuddered and began to rise. Holmes couldn't help but laugh. Well, I'll be damned. Looks like my human handypass is good for more than just buying overpriced drinks. With rising anticipation, the team advanced into the chamber, breath misting in the chill air. And there, in the center of the room, stood a single cryopod, its occupant tantalizingly obscured behind a veil of frost built up over countless years. Deneb hurried over to the control panel, and with a few tapped commands the pod hummed to life, the thawing sequence initiated. Holmes stood nearby, one hand resting on the comforting weight of his sidearm, eyes fixed on the pod as the ice slowly began to clear, and a human face started to become visible behind the glass. The frost melted, revealing a living male human who looked to be in his 30s. He was brawny and had a square jaw. Deneb stared at the man. The pod's vitals showed he was only snoozing, not in centuries-long cryo. The pod hissed and popped open. The man's eyes snapped open and latched onto Holmes. Suddenly the man jumped out of the pod, quick and nimble, grabbing Holmes's gun and pointing it at the team. All in one move. "Who are you? What's happening?" the man barked. His voice boomed even though he hadn't used it in ages. Holmes put his hands up, slow. "I'm Joseph Holmes. We're here to help. It's been centuries since you went into cryo. We're trying to recover your research." The man squinted at Holmes, but lowered the gun a bit when he saw Holmes was human too. "Donovan Kovacs. I was lead engineer on Project Methuselah, a secret project to make humans immortal with better cryotech. My team took the research and ran to keep the human big shots from using it as a weapon. We holed up here to finish the tech, to help everybody. Right when we almost had it, the human troops busted in on us. I jumped in the chamber last second, set it for 5 years, figured things would cool off by then." Kovacs shook his head, eyes wide. "Shit. Centuries. What year is it?" Deneb told him. Kovacs went white. He snatched a small gizmo out of a compartment. "Hey, what's that?" Deneb asked. "Backup of the immortality research. Only I can decode it. I'll cut you a deal. I'll share the data, let you cook up immortality for all. You get me off this rock to disappear." Deneb opened his mouth, but the gizmo in Kovacs' hand beeped. He checked it and his face fell. "Incoming ships, a bunch of them. Human warships, bleeding edge. Must have picked up my pod waking up." "Can't be," Deneb said. "Even human sensors shouldn't reach this far." "Maybe not back then. Looks like the humans kept busy while I was out. We got a jet now." The words barely left Kovacs' mouth when the room rocked hard. Dust rained from the ceiling as human ships blasted the ruins from space. The entry tunnel caved in. They were trapped. Kovac stayed frosty. He tucked the gizmo away. They'll try to grab me alive first, to grill me, but if that goes sideways, they'll slag this place from orbit. Okay, here's the plan. Kovac sprinted through the labyrinthine corridors, the team close on his heels. He led them deeper into the heart of the facility, their footsteps echoing off the metal walls. "There's a hidden hangar," Kovac shouted over his shoulder, "with an experimental ship. It's got an early prototype of the fusion drive that powers the cryo chamber. If we can reach it, we might just have a shot at blasting our way out before the human forces can stop us." He skidded to a halt before a massive set of blast doors. "But first, we have to get through the lab's main chamber, and it's guarded by the facility's most dangerous security measure." The doors ground open with a hiss, revealing a cavernous chamber. As the team stepped inside, Kovac threw out an arm, barring their path. "Nobody move!" The floor of the enormous room was covered in a strange metallic sand, glittering ominously in the dim light. "Nanoswarm," Kovac explained tersely. "It's dormant now, but anything that moves that isn't keyed to the lab's biosignature database will be torn apart at the molecular level." He pointed to a narrow path of clear floor that wound through the deadly sea of nanoswarm to the far door. "There's no time to try and key all of you to the system. We'll have to risk the path. Single file, and no matter what, don't touch the sand." The team exchanged apprehensive glances, but fell into line behind Kovac. They inched their way along the winding path, hardly daring to breathe. The only sound was the soft scuff of their boots against the floor and the distant hum of the nanoswarm. Suddenly, a thunderous boom shook the chamber, dust raining down from the ceiling. The human retrieval team had breached the upper levels. Startled by the noise, one of the Elysians stumbled, his foot coming down hard in the nanoswarm. In an instant, the swarm surged up his leg like a living thing, a million metallic particles glinting as they swarmed over his flesh. The Elysian screamed, a sound of pure agony, as the nanoswarm consumed him. Flesh, bone, and armor alike disintegrated as the swarm tore him apart at the molecular level, his agonized scream cutting off abruptly as the nanoswarm consumed his head. In seconds, there was nothing left of him, not even a speck of dust. The rest of the team watched in horror, the echoes of their comrades' dying scream still ringing in their ears. Shaken, they hastened on, hugging the clear path like it was a lifeline. After what felt like an eternity, they reached the door on the far side of the chamber. But their relief was short-lived. The door was sealed by another biometric lock. Kovac pressed his hand to the scanner, but it flashed red. Access denied. He tried again, with the same result. From above, they could hear the sound of heavy boots and harsh human voices. The retrieval team was getting closer. Kovac cursed under his breath, realizing the truth. They must have removed my clearance from the system. Deneb frantically tried to hack the lock, his fingers flying over the keypad, but the human technology was too advanced, the encryption too complex. Just as all seemed lost, Holmes stepped forward, a flash of inspiration in his eyes. He pressed his own hand to the scanner. To everyone's amazement, the scanner flashed green, and the door hissed open. Kovac stared at Holmes in disbelief. How the hell is that possible? Holmes, equally baffled, could only shrug. Maybe my biosignature was close enough to yours to fool the system. There was no time to ponder the mystery further. Plasma fire erupted over their heads, sizzling bolts of energy searing the air. The human retrieval team had reached the chamber. The team raced into the hangar, plasma bolts zipping past them like angry hornets. Behind them, the nanoswarms surged like a metallic tide, stray shots from the humans' weapons impacting the deadly sand and stirring it to furious life. The team raced across the hangar, boots pounding on the metal deck. The experimental ship loomed before them, all sleek lines and advanced tech. They piled in, the hatch sealing shut with a hiss. Kovac slid into the pilot's chair, hands flying over the controls. The fusion drive hummed to life, a deep thrum that rattled their bones. The hangar doors exploded inward, the human retrieval team pouring through, plasma rifles spitting fire. Bolts splashed off the ship's armored hull. "Hang on!" Kovacs yelled. He punched the thrusters. The ship leaped forward, smashing through the far wall into open sky. The ruins fell away below as they clawed for altitude. "We've got company," Holmes called from the sensor station. The human warships dropped out of the clouds in pursuit, engines flaring. Deneb paled at the readouts. "Their drives, they're fast, cutting edge." Kovacs just grinned, a feral flash of teeth. "Not fast enough. Let's see what this baby can really do." He pushed the ship to full throttle, the G-forces crushing them into their seats. The human ships matched their move. Warning klaxons blared as the gap closed. Holmes swore and triggered the aft cannons, crimson bolts lancing out. The human ships juked and jinked, avoiding the fire. "We can't outrun them," Deneb cried, fingers flying as he tried to coax more speed from the straining drive. Kovacs didn't reply. His eyes flicked to the nav screen, widening at something only he saw. He wrenched the stick hard to port. "Hold on to something!" The ship heeled over, diving for a massive asteroid field, a chaos of tumbling rocks. The human ships didn't hesitate, plunging in after them. And then it was madness, a breakneck slalom through the deadly field, the ship bucking and jolting as near misses shook the hull. The human ships stuck to their tail, undeterred. Holmes poured fire back at them, teeth gritted as the ship shuddered under his feet. Consoles sparked and smoked, the strain proving too much. The ship jerked as a plasma bolt found its mark. Damage alarms howled. "Shields failing," Deneb reported, voice tight. "We can't take another hit like that." Kovacs' eyes narrowed. Up ahead, a truly colossal asteroid tumbled into view, its surface gouged with jagged canyons. He pointed the ship's nose right at it. "Kovacs, are you insane?" Holmes shouted. The former engineer just laughed. "Nope, hold tight." The ship plummeted into the widest canyon, the walls a blur. 2 human ships followed doggedly. The other 2 went high, trying to cut them off. Holmes's stomach dropped away as he saw it. The canyon ended in a sheer wall, a dead end. "It's a trap! Pull up!" But Kovacs shook his head, jaw set. He firewalled the thrusters, rocketing towards the fast-approaching cliff. At the very last second, he killed the drive and flipped the ship end over end. They shot up the canyon wall, momentum carrying them up and over the lip in a topsy-turvy arc. Behind them, the pursuing ships tried to match the insane move. Too late. Twin fireballs lit the night as the ship slammed into the rock wall, shattering into a million burning pieces. Kovacs let out a triumphant whoop as they cleared the rim. The sound died in his throat. Ahead, the remaining 2 human ships hung before them, weapons hot and primed. Kovacs slammed the stick sideways. The ship groaned in protest, too slow. The human ships opened up, a blistering volley that tore through their weakened shields like paper and ripped into the hull. The cabin dissolved into chaos, a cacophony of shrieking alarms and gouts of flame. Kovacs fought with a bucking stick, teeth bared in a rictus. Explosions consumed the rear of the ship. The hull shook itself apart. They fell, trailing smoke and fire, spinning crazily. The night sky whirled above them. "Brace for impact," Kovacs roared. The ship hit like the fist of an angry god. Metal screamed and tore. Bulkheads crumpled like foil. Then a terrible silence. Holmes stirred with a groan. Smoke stung his eyes, his ears rang. He tried to stand and gasped at the white-hot bolt of pain. His legs were shattered, pinned under twisted wreckage. He dragged himself out of the warped frame of the ship into the cold night air. The ship burned behind him, the flames licking hungrily. His blurry eyes found Kovacs. The man was sprawled nearby, a jagged metal spar protruding from his chest. Holmes crawled to him, every movement agony. "Kovacs, hold on, I'll get you out." The fallen engineer coughed wetly, blood on his lips, but his eyes were strangely lucid as they met Holmes. With a trembling hand, he fumbled in his pocket and pulled out the handheld. He held it out to Holmes. "Looks like you're the last man standing, kid." His voice was a weak rasp. "You know what to do." The light faded from his eyes. His hand fell limp, the handheld tumbling to the dirt. Holmes stared numbly at his fallen comrade, at the bodies of the others strewn around the wreckage. He reached out with a shaking hand and took the handheld. As if on cue, spotlights speared down from above, bathing the crash site in harsh white. Holmes squinted up at the human warships descending from the sky like avenging angels. A voice boomed over a loudspeaker, cold and imperious. "Surrender immediately. There's nowhere left to run." Holmes looked at the device in his hand. So small, so innocuous, and yet within it the power to change everything, the key to immortality. He thought of Deneb, so convinced this knowledge could unite the fractured galaxy. He thought of his fallen friends, humans and aliens alike, who had died to keep this secret out of the wrong hands. And he knew what he had to do. Dragging himself upright on a twisted spar, every movement sending spears of white-hot agony through his ruined legs, he raised the handheld high over his head. The human commander's voice rose to a fever pitch. "Don't stop!" But it was too late. With a final defiant cry, Holmes hurled the device into the heart of the flaming wreckage. It vanished into the inferno. For a single breathless moment, nothing happened. Then the ship's damaged fusion core detonated in a blinding white flash. The handheld, the ship, the bodies of the fallen, all were atomized in an instant, reduced to their component atoms in the heat of an artificial sun. As the glare faded and the spots cleared from his vision, Holmes found himself on his knees in the ash, staring at the scorched crater that was all that remained of the ship. Around him, the human soldiers stood in a ring, weapons lowered, faces unreadable behind their polarized visors. The commander strode forward, pulling his helmet off. His face was a mask of anger and disbelief. He hauled Holmes roughly upright, snarling in his face. "What have you done, you fool? Do you realize what you've just destroyed?" Holmes met the man's furious gaze, his own eyes hard as flint. When he spoke, his voice was low and cold. "Some secrets aren't meant to be shared. Human or alien, we all get one life. Best we don't waste it chasing pipe dreams." The commander stared at him for a long moment, jaw working. Then, with a disgusted shake of his head, he shoved Holmes towards the waiting soldiers. "Get him out of my sight." As they dragged him none too gently to the waiting ship, Holmes looked up at the stars whirling overhead. The last survivor of Project Methuselah, the man who had held the key to eternal life in his hands and thrown it away. The galaxy would never know how close it had come to conquering death. The dream of immortality would remain just that, a dream. But perhaps, Holmes mused as the hatch sealed shut above him and the ship lifted off into the night sky, that was for the best. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.